Who is the real St. Patrick? It's that time of year again when everybody puts on their green and celebrates with corned beef and cabbage, and people speak of leprechauns. Perhaps, like me, you go to Lutheran Satire and you get the St. Patrick's bad analogies video going, and oh yeah, Patrick, right? Lots of great traditions around this time of the year. And in fact, with St. Patrick's Day being one of the few Christian holidays still widely celebrated in the culture, it actually becomes a great way to kind of enter into a conversation about the true St. Patrick, the gospel that he preached, and who Jesus is for us. So, and even apart from that, right? I mean, a lot of Irish people settled here in America. I have some Irish roots. There's lots of Irish people around the Midwest, for example, New York. So it's all good, right? If you want to have some Guinness, some corned beef and cabbage, Reuben, whatever you do to celebrate St. Patrick's Day, a lot of that can be good. Now, obviously, some of it isn't. Right? We all know stories of debauchery and inappropriate celebrations happening around this time of the year. But I just wanted to pop on here and talk about the true St. Patrick. Partly because his story is widely unknown. And so a lot of Christians don't even have the opportunity to use tomorrow as a launch point for evangelism because they're just uninformed. So my goal right now is just to give you some resources, talk a little bit about the true St. Patrick, and help equip you to have evangelistic conversations with real people in your circle of influence this St. Patrick's Day. So starting off, a couple of children's books that are really, really good. First of all is Patrick by Voice of the Martyrs. This book is excellent. It's very engaging. It's very short and succinct. It has some good illustrations. It really connects the story of Patrick to even the persecuted church today. So this is a great book, especially for younger readers, to get the basic gist of Patrick's story. Like Joseph in the Old Testament, Patrick was a slave in Ireland. He was kidnapped from his home on the coast of England, taken to Ireland, served 6 years as a slave as a young boy, and that's really where he came to faith. So even though he had been raised in a church family, a Christian family, had been given all the advantages of that Christian upbringing, he rejected it in a sense, right? He was negligent and complacent. And God, through his providence and through slavery in Ireland, brought Patrick to faith. Then God miraculously delivered Patrick from that slavery and brought him back home to England. And he was able to study and grow in the grace and knowledge of Jesus and become a pastor and a bishop in the church. And then later, like Paul, with the Macedonian call, the vision of the man for Macedonia. So Patrick had a vision in the night of people from Ireland saying, "Holy boy, come back and walk among us once more." And so following the leading of the Holy Spirit in this vision, he left it all, his family, his homeland, everything that was comfortable and familiar, and followed God back to Ireland, this time not as a slave, but as a slave of Christ, someone who would give the rest of his life to evangelizing the lost. And because of his time of slavery, he knew the language, he knew the customs. So he's this great example of a man who was a sinner saved by grace, someone who was excelled in cross-cultural mission, while many in the church of his day thought the Irish were too backwards and too barbaric to be saved. Patrick went with the gospel to the Irish, and he met them on their terms, gave them the gospel of Christ, and God used him mightily to convert Ireland to Jesus. Another great book is Simonetta Carr's Patrick of Ireland. Excellent book. Simonetta Carr is just fantastic across the board. I have her book on Irenaeus as well. She has a whole bunch of saint biographies from church history that are just great. She even has a book on church history that we use for homeschooling that is excellent. So highly recommend Simonetta Carr's book on Patrick and all of her works on church history. If you want to learn more about any figure from church history, if she's written on it, I would recommend going there. And finally, this DVD, I Am Patrick, the patron saint of Ireland, is extremely well done. It's a docu-drama. It's got a lot of great acting. Part of it is interviews with clergy and scholars and all of this, but it's also some acting. And so there's the young Patrick, sort of the middle-aged Patrick, and then the elderly Patrick. And John Rhys Davies plays the elderly Patrick, and it's incredibly well done. It's put out by CBN Films. Again, I normally wouldn't probably be promoting CBN too quickly, but again, this is the truth, true history. It's great. It's well done, well researched. Acting's good, and it really helps dig into the truth of who St. Patrick really was. And finally, you can get a copy of The Confession of St. Patrick. I recommend this book, Reverend Thomas Olden's book on St. Patrick. It has not only the Confession of St. Patrick, but a lot of other writing. It's very thin, but it has a lot of great knowledge and resources where you can learn more about Patrick. So I just love it. He starts off writing, again, as an old man, he's been opposed, not only in danger at every turn, like the Apostle Paul, in danger and famine and nakedness, sword, right? Sometimes he was thrown in prisons. He feared for his life, and yet he trusted God to deliver him. But also, like Paul, at the end of his life, Patrick says, I, Patrick, a sinner, the rudest and least of all the faithful, and an object of the greatest contempt to many. He's not writing his confession to defend himself, but he's writing his confession to defend the work of God that Christ has done and accomplished in Ireland through Patrick. And like Paul, who said at the end of his life, I'm the chief of sinners. So Patrick starts off, I'm a sinner, great contempt. I'm not the greatest in learning. I'm not proclaiming myself. I'm proclaiming him, the one who loved me and gave himself for me. So he shares his story of being a slave, of his miraculous deliverance from slavery, of his training in the church for ministry, and then ultimately of his ministry to the Irish and how God worked through him mightily to bring the pagan people of Ireland to Christ and deliver them from a very dark and demonic Druidism. So St. Patrick, highly recommend learning about the true St. Patrick, that you would be able to not only educate yourself, but be inspired by the example of a man who preached Christ faithfully in a cross-cultural context against all odds, even against opposition from other people in the church and church leaders who, like Joseph, served God faithfully even in a time and a season of imprisonment, and like Paul was willing to go into new frontiers, take the gospel where it had never gone before, so that the name of Christ would be known, reverenced, praised, honored, and worshipped, and that the Lamb who was slain might receive the reward of his suffering. So the true story of St. Patrick is so much better than just a saint driving snakes out or turning the river in Chicago green or getting riotously drunk tomorrow because Patrick. So I think the best way that Patrick would want us to remember him is to remember the gospel that he preached. And so I just commend these resources to you. You'd be able to educate yourself. And then like Patrick, go to your circle of influence with the good news that Patrick preached and say, did you know that the true St. Patrick was a missionary, a man who, like Joseph, endured slavery, who, like Paul, went to new places with the gospel, suffered greatly for the gospel, but saw the conversion of Ireland? It's amazing. So, happy St. Patrick's Day. I recommend these resources. And now, equipped with this knowledge, may you be equipped by the Holy Spirit to proclaim the same gospel as Patrick and share that gospel with everyone you know. God bless.